Welcome back. Trying something new. I'm using new streaming software, so let me know what you guys think. Hit me in the comment section in the chat. Let me know if you guys are liking the audio. Switching a couple of things up. I kind of want to make a more interactive chat and also be able to display things for you guys. So I was kind of trying to figure out what was going on with notifications. So forgive me if you kind of seen something start and then say something end. Just want to kind of make sure that this actually is going out to you guys, opposed to just going out into the ether and then people, no one's seeing it. So I kind of want to talk about this subject. I think it's important. I've been seeing a lot of carpenters talk about this lately, and I think that it should be addressed. What's going on with the carpenter field? What's going on with the carpentry period when it comes to all skilled labor? Why does it seem like the carpenters are falling behind? And how important is it for carpenters to be more knowledgeable about what's going on as far as the field, about what are some of the difficulties when it comes to our craft opposed to others? So I kind of want to address that a little bit. I'm going to send some notifications out one more time just to make sure everybody has it, and then I'm going to start right now. So give me 1 second. How you doing? What is that, Harley? Nice to see you here. I don't have very many people yet, but I want to get this thing started. So recently in our union, we just signed a new contract, and a lot of guys are really displeased. Majority of the guys who are displeased are kind of the guys who were always displeased. I feel like you kind of have to take the good with the bad. I mean, there's never going to be a perfect contract as far as like being in the union or just being a worker, period. There's kind of a balance you have to take where, the owners make a certain amount of money, we make a certain amount of money. I don't think either side is ever really going to be perfectly happy. And so let me see if I turn this up a little bit. How is the audio now? I turned it up a little bit on the dashboard. So like I was saying before, I don't think anybody's going to necessarily be perfectly happy every time. I think that's a perfect marriage. If the owners are really happy, then that means the workers usually are getting shorted, and vice versa. If the workers are making all the money and then the owners aren't making anything, they're not going to tend to stay in that field or in the industry. So you kind of have to find that balance. A lot of carpenters right now feel like they're being shorted. They feel like they're not getting paid their fair wage. And so I think it's important that we kind of speak about like, what are some of the issues that come up with carpentry that maybe aren't being felt in other industries or other skilled labor, as far as like electricians, pipe fitters, maybe people who are in other skilled trades, but kind of take a little bit more certifications or requirements to do those fields. So I kind of want to watch this video, react to it, and then also kind of inject some of my thinking and some of my ideas while I watch this video. So this video is about 1 year old, so it's not that old, but I think the issues are still pretty prevalent right now. So this video is called Why America's Running Out of Carpenters. And so we're going to talk about that in this video.
America has a carpenter problem. We've had a regular shortage as far back as the 1940s. In fact, there have only been two significant reprieves for construction as a whole since then, the 2008 Great Recession and the 2020 pandemic. But in 2022, as American home construction approaches pre-2008 levels, it's all coming to a head. Across all the construction fields, there's an estimated shortage of some 650,000 tradespeople. But it was specifically carpenters, above all, that topped the National Association of Home Builders 2021 list of subcontractors that are in short supply. Builders just can't find them, and it would be even worse if it wasn't for the pandemic-fueled supply issues. So, of all the skilled trades, Why carpentry? What are the
Okay, so before we get started with that, I kind of want to kind of give my own views on the subject first, so that so that I can give my views, and then we can kind of talk about the subject, so that I feel like let me turn this down a little bit. This is super loud on my end. So that when we talk about this subject, I kind of give my views, so we can talk about why do I think carpenters get paid less than other trades? And I think one of the major issues is we don't have a huge moat as far as like what keeps people out of our trade. So we don't have a lot of certifications. We don't have a barrier of entry as far as like what like testing in to be a carpenter. You don't see that same thing happening, and so because of that, it makes it so that low skilled laborers can join in the carpenters, whether it be in residential or be in the union, and kind of drive wages down a little bit, opposed to other trades that have. Jesus, this is just super loud in my ears. Okay. Can you guys still hear that? Yeah. So other trades have a larger moat, meaning other things that keep outsiders from joining in to lower wages or suppress wages. So that being like certifications, big dependency on audio levels between your mic and your video you played. Big discrepancy. Okay. Okay. So is this live? Yes, this is live. And you said there's a big discrepancy between the audio levels. So I'm still working on this little dashboard I got right now. It's something new to me, so I want to make sure that I'm doing the best I can for you guys. So let me see if I can fix that. Let me see 1 second. Okay. So I'm going to add this right now. So let's try this again. So like I said before, we are going to be addressing some of the reasons why. And so, like I said, I think it's because of the work we do. There's so many more carpenters on a job site, and so when you have a large amount of labor, that means that usually the wages are going to be lower. And because of the barrier of entry, like the certifications, we don't have a lot, so you don't have to test in, you don't have to be a certain like intellect to get into the carpenters union. So I think that kind of plays a piece. Like with electricians, they're usually known as like the smarter trade. You get the test, you have to be a certain level of like math certificates to actually get into trades. And so I think that's important too. So we're going to address that. So let's get into the video and see why they think that we get paid less, or why we're running out of carpenters.
the main culprits for carpentry's falling appeal? Where have they all gone? We can break down the mass exodus down to 3 reasons: compensation, certification, and early retirement. The median annual income of a carpenter is just over $48,000. That's significantly less than boilermakers, plumbers.
Now, also, carpenters are a field that doesn't necessarily have a lot of union support in certain sectors, like residential. I think residential is the reason why this wages are so much lower. Like if you are in a major city and you're working in a union, you're getting paid way more than this for the most part, especially if you're fully employed, working 40 hours a week. But if you're talking about residential, we're talking about things where you're just swinging hammers, you're framing, you're doing the same thing a lot on a lot of job sites. You're going to see a discrepancy between what you make in commercial and residential. And so I think when it comes to like electricians, a lot of those jobs are still going to be like union, especially on the bigger commercial jobs. Now, I'm not sure as far as how unionized the residential side is for electricians, because I don't know any non-union electricians, and I assume maybe some who are in an open shop might not. But again, those certifications that are like the law are definitely going to play a huge factor in what the pay is. And so Brian Sullivan says laborers are willing to jump on carpenter work. That's true. That's true. Totally.
Brick masons and electricians. Ethan James, the man behind the YouTube channel The Honest Carpenter, says low pay is a result of the law.
How does the audio sound now for the video opposed to how it sounded earlier?
Long hours needed to do the job.
Our trade, as opposed to many of the other trades, is a high hour volume job. Plumbers are often in and out. If it's a repair, many of those repairs occur in a day. But carpenters, a deck or something like that is going to translate into hundreds of labor hours. It's going to be tricky for your carpenter to demand 90 an hour if they're going to be there for 300 hours or something, depending on the complexity of the job.
But the nation's lack of qualified carpenters is part of a bigger trend. In 2021, Stanley Black & Decker and KRC Research spoke to 800 high schoolers, 200 parents, and 500 workers.
Yeah, Haley, I definitely agree. Every time, but then the same laborers will complain they shouldn't be doing carpenter's work because they're just laborers. The audio is closer and the video is still louder than you, but not as dramatic. Okay, let me just, like I said, I'm trying to figure this out. Let me turn it down a little bit more. Okay. Yeah, I think that's constantly happens a lot of times on my job sites where I've worked, whether it be I've worked for masons, I've worked for general contractors, and you'll see kind of a blurring of the lines where it's like, this is carpenter work, this is labor work, what should I do, what can't I do? And sometimes people just get the job done, they will jump in. So I think it's important that we speak about that too. Like, laborers usually tend to do things that aren't going to require a carpenter skill set, whether it be like stripping form work, whether it be like moving things around. They're more like that's more their job description, right? Like packing, equipment out, trashing stuff out. That's usually their job. But sometimes they may be asked to like remove something, but they shouldn't be building. I mean, if they want to be a carpenter, they should be a carpenter, opposed to like a company taking advantage of them, having them wear tool bags, having them cut lumber, actually having them frame stuff. I think that's kind of out of their skill set. They shouldn't be doing those things. And so I think it's important as carpenters, we kind of do address that. But a lot of times you are going to see like a blending. I've seen some companies, they'll hire laborers as masons and they won't pay them the proper wages, but they'll still have them do every single thing a mason does. And so that's kind of going away from like, what's the whole point of being in a union? What's the whole point of actually being in that skill set? And it does suppress wages, because if somebody can hire you on as a laborer and make you do everything like a journeyman mason or a journeyman carpenter, then they're getting more bang for their buck and they're going to be dissuaded from actually hiring adequate carpenter. So I think it's important that we do address it on the job site. But again, realize that there are some complexities when it comes to what you're doing every day. If you're a person that's constantly nagging about like, hey, that person should never touch a saw, or that person shouldn't be doing this, you're going to see issues arise from that, just to let you know. So let's get back into the video.
In skilled trade professions. The survey found that the majority of young people have favorable views of the skilled trades, but that many believed that the starting pay was even less than what it actually is. So not only is carpentry one of the lowest paying skilled labor jobs, but the public thinks that the pay is even lower than it actually is.
We've kind of been beating it down for so long and making it seem like a dead-end path or career, more like a punishment is how I see it. Like, if you mess up, you're gonna have to.
Hey, that's definitely true. The carpenter field, the skilled labor field, is definitely looked as like a B tier job. Like if you land in this field, you are definitely going to be someone who is not going to be successful in life. When you're old, your hands are going to be, arthritic, and you're not going to have the quality of life as someone who's working a desk job, filling in Excel sheets, like, going to college. Like that's the proper path. And I think now that's kind of coming to a head now that college is getting so expensive and people are not seeing the same results. And then again, when you have a surplus people all doing the same thing, you have to then step up to the next level. So now people are getting higher level degrees, getting more and more debt just to get the same outcome before, when they can just have for a college degree now. So we're definitely seeing that. So these things are kind of working to our advantage a little bit when it comes to skilled labor, like, them having a negative reputation, the job being hard. So those who are actually in it get paid more, but at the same time, like, we still have big projects. We need a lot of guys. And so if this persists, it's going to be, difficult if you have to pay every single person joining the trades $300,000 a year just to get anything done. Nothing's going to get accomplished like that. So let's get back into it.
To build stuff.
Certifications and licenses, or lack thereof, also play a big role in carpenters' pay. To become an electrician or plumber in most states, you need a certification or license to practice. Carpentry, however, has less rigid standards. Ethan James worries that when just about anyone can call themselves a carpenter, it may lose its meaning and value.
If you were in North Carolina with me, you could put a tool belt on and say, I'm a professional carpenter, and advertise yourself as a professional carpenter. There's not a lot of red tape. you have no way of knowing what the breadth of their experience is or what they're qualified to handle.
And that's true too. Like I was saying before, because there are like certain laws of like what you can and can't do as an electrician, a pipe fitter, a plumber, like a tech that works on like elevators or escalators. That is like a barrier of entry, and again, that adds into that adds into the moat of the reason why electricians get paid so much more, because the law requires it. You can't have. Let's just be honest. This is not any kind of racist or any kind of like xenophobic remarks, but if you have illegal immigrants coming and they can kind of do your job a little bit, whether or not be able to speak the language, not know the same safety standards as you, and it kind of suppresses the wages, because there's not that same barrier of entry to get into the carpenter field. All you need is a tool belt and a hammer, and you can kind of be bossed around and kind of do the job. And because of that, that does add into the reason why the wages are suppressed opposed to other skilled fields. So I think that's important to address that. And it kind of does play into the field too of like why, in certain states, it definitely is even worse because the regulations are even looser when it comes to who can join. A lot of the southern states, I hear a lot of people complaining about, trying to compete with guys who are willing to just work people under the table. Like they're going to work for cash. They're going to work a longer hours because their standard of living is a lot lower. It's really hard to compete. I've said this 1,000 times. If you're competing against a starving man for a job, it's going to be very hard as an American middle-class person to compete with that. Their level of determination, what they'll accept as far as like the safety standards, what they'll accept as far as the treatment, just like the job field itself, they're going to do a lot more. So you got to understand, like there are those barriers that other trades don't have. So when people complain about like, hey, we need to stem illegal immigration, they're complaining because it affects, their job. But if you're in the laptop class, if you are in, a college field where, you're not worried about illegal immigration affecting your job, I can definitely see why you're more like, it's more advantageous for you. So I think that's a huge reason why you see a lot of people in the trades, they don't necessarily dislike illegal immigration because of the people, but they also have it's also affecting their wages more than other career fields. And so let's go with some of these comments real quick. I'm a carpenter and we always help the laborers and we don't complain or moan about it. That's a fact. I mean, it kind of depends on who you are. I've seen people complain all the time. It doesn't matter if it's raining. It doesn't matter if it's sunny. They're always going to have something to complain about. Some guys will just do whatever it takes. You know what I mean? Whether you like it or not, I'm just going to do it. I can have that attitude when it comes to carpentry. There are certain things that are a lot easier, installing windows, doing siding, doors and hardware inside, being nice and warm, and other jobs where it sucks, like being outside, being in a mud pit, doing concrete formwork. That isn't as enjoyable, but at the same time, it's still in the carpenter field. So because, again, our field is so wide, it's very hard for you to say, okay, are you a carpenter? Well, can you do clean room? Can you do hardy siding? Can you do vertical concrete? And I think that's another reason too why we don't have the same like certification requirements, because our scope is so wide. It'd be hard to require everybody to be like a journeyman level of every single trade. It would take 20,000 hours to be able to do that. Like we'll say, hey, I'm super competent at every single facet of carpentry, when most carpenters are never going to do every single thing. You know what I mean? So Greg said, just got home. My internet is not cooperating. And then Eric says, hey, Antonio, I'm in a pre-apprenticeship program and will be applying to the PNCI in March. What areas do you recommend looking for a job? Downtown always is going to be huge. Wherever you see cranes, there's a lot of work going on. A lot of these older buildings that have been kind of decrepit. We're seeing a lot more work going on there. So again, usually when it comes to like usually when it comes to union carpenters, wherever you're going to see a crane, wherever you need a lot of guys at one time to work, you're definitely going to see it there. So let's get back into the video. And then Greg said, step 1, nails. Step 2, more nails. Yeah, correct. And then Num Diaz says, Jesus saves. Yeah, totally.
Handle, I mean, these days, everybody's level of carpentry experience is like 100% unique to them.
The pandemic spurred a lot of early retirees in the carpentry field. Suddenly, a large group of them was gone. According to the Associated Builders and Contractors, the average age of retirement for construction workers is 61. Today, a staggering 1/5 of the current workforce is over the age of 55. There's a fear that, in the next 10 years, the majority of the remaining carpenters will retire and will be left with even fewer.
Sorry, I was muted. That's something else I want to address when it comes to the carpenter field. When you have a whole bunch of guys with all the experience, all leaving at the same time, and a part of construction, especially, from what I heard in the past, like everybody being like dog eat dog, everybody's trying to be the last person standing on the job. People are kind of holding back on their secrets, or kind of holding back on their tips their whole career because they don't want to give away, the information so the guy next to them can take their job. That kind of poverty mindset, that kind of like lack of abundance, you see that a lot when it comes to carpenters. I mean, if you go on YouTube and you see anybody doing anything when it comes to carpentry, everybody in the comment is just bashing them. There's just a really negative vibe when it comes to carpenters, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's how every trade is, but every time I see any kind of tips, tricks, anything, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, it's just all out like mayhem. It's all out like negativity. And so now a lot of the older guys who have like, the knowledge that can really, jumpstart someone's apprenticeship, really make them more effective and efficient, they're all retiring and they're taking all the knowledge with them. Since I've been a carpenter about 7 years, I think most guys are good. There are some guys who aren't as good, but I haven't seen a ton of like master carpenters where you just look at their work and you're like, holy shit, this guy is good. This guy is a monster. This guy knows exactly what he's doing. A lot of guys are just like decent. Like we're all part of a machine. A lot of us are just cogs, and we kind of just do our job the best of our ability. We kind of roll with the punches. But again, a lot of those guys who've been in the trades for like 30, 40, 30, 40 years, who have a plethora of knowledge that can really, take an apprentice from, a basic level and get them almost a journeyman status within a couple of months, just working with them because they show you all these different tricks that you might not be able to think of, and things that they've learned through trial and error. We're not seeing that information get passed on. So you're having journeymen who really kind of taught themselves how to be journeymen. So they're not getting a lot of that information, and it's not being passed down. And again, especially when it comes to like union carpentry, we don't have the same benefits that a lot of these other channels. If you see a lot of channels where, they're blowing up because they're doing jobs, a lot of times they're running their own companies. And so they're talking about residential, but that doesn't really help us as union carpenters because we can't really, film us every single day talking about, what's going on our job site. Because again, we get paid to work, not, make our YouTube channels and make our dreams come true as far as like media. So I think that's one of the difficulties. So a lot of guys do kind of come in blind, and they are learning as they go. And so that process is a lot slower, opposed to if we had a lot of really, really competent older gentlemen coming in, like really showing us the ropes and how to do things, a better way. And like I said, again, making us more advanced because they have so much more knowledge. I think a lot of young guys are willing to listen, and they are willing to take that information in if it was available to them. So I think that's a huge issue too.
Fewer.
We're losing them. We're not replacing them. We're also losing their knowledge base, which is just as important because we're not seeing the kind of information transfer from the older generation to the younger generation that we've had essentially for every generation in human history for thousands of years. For the first time ever, we're not getting it.
There is some hope, though, in our high schools. According to the Department of Education, there was a major dip in construction class enrollment in American high schools from 2007 to 2017. The past few years, though, have shown a rise in interest once again. Some attribute this to social media and reality television.
So Greg says most of the negativity is from people who have no idea what they're doing, but once built a shed on a weekend. So you should see the welders' comments. I agree. Harley says a lot of the really arrogant carpenters in the local, and that's half the problem. Yeah, I just don't understand it personally. The arrogance, the negativity. I mean, most of the guys, if you are as good as you say you are, then why aren't you running your own company? I feel like most of us are going to be average. Most of us are going to be mid. We are going to be a part of a bigger whole. We are kind of cogs and gears to make something happen. A lot of times you're going to come onto a job and a sub might do the framing, and so you might be doing the sheeting on the outside. So you kind of have to depend on their skill set. It's very rare that carpenters do every single thing, especially in the union, from the dirt all the way to the siding, waterproofing, doors and hardware, windows. your company is going to sub certain things out, and so you have to kind of roll with the punches. Everything might not be plumb, everything might not be squared, and so you have to find ways to still do your job adequately, but not make a lot of issues and problems and complain a lot. I know a lot of times in construction, that's the first go-to thing. Like, okay, this is a problem, let's complain about it. I've been guilty of it. I think most people who work in the trades have, but I think after you've done it for a while, you kind of see, okay, this isn't perfect. Now I know how to fix it. But the arrogancy, like I just don't understand. If you're so arrogant, if you're so good, which I rarely ever seen guys who have the attitudes like that really be badass carpenters. Usually they're kind of like covering up their inadequacies, and that's why they talk so much. That's why they're so braggadocious. Usually the humblest guys are the best guys because they know what they got. They know how good they are. They don't have to, tell people how good they are. Their work shows for itself, right? The same thing with guys who really know how to fight. They don't, talk about beating people up all the time. They just do it, or they just defend themselves because they have that inner confidence. And so I've seen that a lot. The people who are the loudest in the room usually are the people who are going to be super trash usually, or they're covering up for their inadequacies. And so I think that is something that hurts our field, because a lot of young people, they see that negativity and they're like, I'm not going to rush into that fire. Like, I just see how hard they are and people who are just doing things that they can't even do. And so if you're going to be such an asshole to people who are trying to help, or, start out, giving information, they may just discover some of these things. And so they're excited about, passing that knowledge on. If you're going to bash them the way they do on the internet, like, well, listen, I don't ever want to join that field. Now, some of the same things may apply to other career choices, but you just don't see it be as vocal online. And so I think that's something that definitely dissuades a lot of young people from joining. Greg says, if you can't find anything about your job that you could have done better, then you will be eternally mediocre. True. Complaining is one of the few things I know I was good at. So I'll try not to practice it anymore. Man, it is so easy to find flaws in things. And then when you are then subject to those same, critiques, you have to humble yourself. I think that was a big thing for me. I know I talked about this a little bit in one of my videos, but I remember being like a third term and I just kind of figured out a little bit about siding. I kind of had a good idea what I was doing. So I started getting real arrogant and really feeling myself. And I thought, guys around me, they can't see me. Now that I figured this out, like, everything's going to fall into place. And I go to the next job site and then I'm just humbled. Like, listen, man, you're not that good. You're basic. You figured out one small thing. And so now you want to take that attitude to everything you do. And then how could, the thing is, if someone could become a master by their third term, that means that either whatever you're doing takes a very, very low skill set, or you're just delusional. And that's kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you learn something and then now you think you're a master, but realistically you really are still basic. You really are still learning. And then once you kind of figure out, there's an advanced level to this that, like, I can't even approach yet. It's like playing basketball. You might be able to make a couple shots, but then once you see NBA players playing at the highest level, you realize there's leaps and bounds to all this. There's levels. And so the more you learn, the better you get. And I feel like when you try to focus more on like improving yourself, I think that's when you see a lot more growth, opposed to complaining about why things aren't going right. That's going to happen always, especially when you have huge job sites where you have a lot of moving pieces. Nothing's ever going to be, perfect. Nothing's ever going to be plumb level square every single time. You're dealing with things that it's not perfect, right? You're dealing with lumber. We're dealing with different fasteners. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. So we focus more about how we can improve, how we can, benefit others. I think that's definitely the better mindset. And I think that definitely is going to help those who are around you want to be around you longer. The person that complains a lot is usually the person that, like, people want to get the fuck away from, because those guys are going to make your life miserable. They usually they drag the morale down. And so I think it's important that, when we talk about how can we improve our union, how can we improve the field, I think just guys being less critical, guys being more understanding, and guys actually helping and not complaining as much, I think definitely can be helpful.
Television programs centered around homes and general construction. The carpenters with these accounts inject humor and personalities into their educational fix-it-yourself videos. Like many things in America, the future of carpentry depends on its youth.
My dad always said when I was young, doctors will always be necessary because people will always get sick. It's like carpenters are just doctors for houses, and houses will always get sick too, so carpenters will always be necessary.
And that's true. Like, I think sometimes people put like this morality on certain job titles. Like, you know, if you're a cop or you're a teacher, you're just held in some like higher esteem because of your job title, and so like you should be given a lot more like praise or respect. But I think that everything has to be done, and I think that there are some jobs that maybe you might not want to do, but I do think they still deserve, you know, your respect, because people are coming in, they're sacrificing their time, they could be doing things that they want to do as far as like entertainment or being lazy. So I mean, if you're cleaning toilets, if you're planting trees, if you're cutting down things, like these jobs aren't necessarily like a lower class job per se. And so I think that's a very important topic we need to speak about too. Is like, I mean, if the pandemic didn't show it, I don't know what would. Like, there are certain jobs that if they're not done, the society falls apart. And a lot of those jobs are working class, blue collar jobs. They kind of keep the country going. And if we do not adequately give them the respect they deserve, then you're going to be paying those guys the same wages as a doctor. Because again, if you don't fill them and they have to be done, either nobody's going to get them done, or it's just going to be super expensive for those who do have that skill set. So I'm going to go back and let's see. I think that's the end of that video. Let me see if I can find the other one. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to play this other video, and then I think we'll see how it goes from there.
So I'm going to tell you this story. I don't tell.
I like this guy's attitude. I think this is the Honest Carpenter. He has a great channel. I think the guy's attitude really helps a lot of people feel more comfortable joining in the trades. Again, the rough nature of carpentry, when you see on the outside, if you aren't, you know, in it, you may view it a lot more negative than actually being in it. A lot of guys do talk a lot of shit, and I think that's not necessarily, it's a bad thing if like maybe you don't have the rapport, but like once you're actually in it and you think things that look toxic on the outside, once you're like bantering, you're talking shit back and forth, you're kind of building that camaraderie amongst each other, it actually is not that bad. And so I do think that sometimes carpentries or the field period gets a bad rap because people don't see it from the inside. And so a lot of times if we once you join, you get a different perspective than what it actually is on the outside. So that banter, that talking shit, that's actually building a stronger bond amongst each other. And so the guys who really can't handle that tend to leave, and that ends up making a stronger unit. Because again, when it's hard and people are, you know, getting, you know, they're leaving and they can't make it through the banter, that means usually like if you have a 14-hour pour day, a 16-hour pour day, that, you know, things are going wrong or things aren't perfect, those guys tend to break anyway. So you'd much rather have them fall off in a time that's not, you know, perfect, opposed to them staying on and straggling, and then when they actually are needed, then they're not coming up when you need them there, when it's the most important, most critical. I love to see that you're live. I really enjoy your channel. I'm glad I found, and I hope you keep making these videos. Hey, I appreciate you guys. I kind of want to go live more often. I kind of want to talk to you guys opposed to like making some videos, because again, I said before, it is kind of difficult trying to balance like my family and then also trying to make videos, and the editing takes, you know, forever. I'm not a super competent, you know, with the computer. So I'm trying to find a balance where I can make some standalone videos, but also, you know, feed you guys good content still. If you make a mistake, take the time to fix it. Don't try to just cover it up and move on. Don't put everyone's job at risk. That is something that's huge. Greg just brought up. I think that has to be highlighted. There are so many times on jobs where you make a mistake. Say you cut the board, you might have inched it. And so instead of just getting another board and cutting it and then, you know, fixing the frame mistake, guys will just like over fasten it. They'll put a whole bunch of nails in it, and then they'll walk away from it. It's like, that's not structural. That's going to get called out. And so say it does get called out later and something does, you know, say the wall falls apart right there, or there's someone tries to put backing in there and that stud doesn't stay in place. And they have to take all the drywall off, fix that same mistake, and that's going to cost your company and maybe your job a lot more money than it would be if you just fixed the mistake right when it happened. If you miss something, it is imperative that you address it as soon as possible. Just sit in that L, just sit in the fact that you made a mistake and then kind of ingest that, but then don't try to just move on really quickly. Fix the problem, talk to whoever you can, because if you don't, these things get the avalanche and they get worse and worse and worse. I've had people who have, maybe they drilled into a pipe, they didn't say anything, and then as time has gone on, it wasn't a factor, and they try to, skirt on and leave. But then when they turn the water on or sprinkler, wherever it is, and then you have that explosion of water, they could have fixed that problem way beforehand, but they chose to be a coward. I'm just going to be honest with you. They chose to be a coward instead of addressing an issue. And so now people are suffering after them. So I think it's really important that, when something happens, take a second, find whoever you need to address, whether it be your foreman or your journeyman or your superintendent. Tell them what happened, because it's so much easier to fix a problem right then and there, opposed to waiting and hoping that, somebody will, not see the mistake, and then, they can not see the mistake, and then they can maybe get away with it. So I think that's important. So let's get back into the video.
A lot of stories on this channel, but I'm going to tell you this one because I think it's important. A couple years ago, I lived in this apartment and they started building a 7-house development across the street. The lot graders came in and cleared out the lot, and they were followed by a little asphalt and concrete company that put in the driveways and a little side street. The foreman on that job was an old guy from the Louisiana Bayou. He was Cajun. He had this amazing accent. He always used to joke with me because I was in construction too, and he always called me boss. And we would chat and swap stories before I got my truck to go to work in the morning. If I had to guess, he was probably pushing 70. And there was only 2 or 3 guys on his crew, and they all seemed to be in their 40s and 50s. So one morning I came out, and he was on the job site all by himself. He was down on his hands and knees, and he was troweling out a concrete apron. He didn't see me, but I noticed that when he stood up, it looked like he was in pain. He put his hand on his hip, and he just didn't seem as happy as usual to be on the job site. I felt bad for him, and when I went by, he saw me, and I said, "Man, you got to get a young guy to do that for you." And he looked right at me, and he said, "There ain't no more young guys, boss." And that really stuck with me, because looking around my professional world, I realized that he was right. There's a real problem forming, and it doesn't get talked about as much as it should, because I don't think people realize that we're on the precipice of what could be a real crisis, and we're probably not going to acknowledge it until we go over the edge. So today, I want to try to slow things down a little bit and talk about what's really at stake here. And I'm going to try to answer the question that people ask me every week. Where have all the carpenters?
I think that's a problem too, that a lot of times issues that are arising in your industry aren't ever going to be addressed by the public until it is, going to affect them personally, until you're seeing houses cost a lot more. House inflation is going higher, not just because of, the labor cost and, because of the material, but again, because when you don't have the bodies there to do these jobs, you have to pay the people who are still skillful in these industries more money. And that's just going to keep happening. I've heard of certain countries where if you can't, fix your own like plumbing, or you can't fix your own electrical, you're going to be paying an arm and a leg. I heard Germany is a big example of like you have to do a lot of DIY stuff yourself because there aren't enough skilled laborers out there. And so I think that's going to be a huge thing moving forward, like where if you cannot, do your own work, if you can't, patch your own holes, if you can't paint your own buildings, your own housing, then you're going to be paying an arm and a leg for those who actually do have that skill set and actually do have those tools. And so I think moving forward, if we keep this mindset of going to college is the only path towards success, and if you are in the trades, you are a lower class person, at that it continues to be the mindset, we're going to see these price, skyrocket, especially for the trades that have that, larger barrier to entry.
It's gone. So the truth is, I haven't actually worked in the field doing the day-to-day labor as a carpenter in about a year now. The channel blew up in early 2020, and it changed my life in a lot of ways. One of them is that it pays me now, and I don't necessarily have to wear the tool belt anymore. But oddly enough, that's not what pulled me out of the construction field. In fact, I wouldn't have even started a YouTube channel if it wasn't for this other thing. Somewhere in about 2018, I began to develop this fairly serious knee problem. I had plowed up a bunch of cartilage on the back of my right kneecap, and it was making a lot of things very agonizing. Not only was manual labor painful, but some days just standing in line to get a cup of coffee was enough to make me break out in a cold sweat. And it's no mystery to me how this happened. I've been working construction on and off since I was 13. So at 36, I had 20 plus years of crawling in basements, climbing up on ladders and roofs, and carrying heavy materials around. On top of that, I've been working completely alone for the last 10 years.
That's something also is very important. I know a lot of young guys, if you don't have the same skill set as your other coworkers, you try to really overload your body with like carrying a lot of material, whether it be like lumber or you're carrying, multiple sheets of plywood. And because of that, a lot of guys are injuring themselves. You hear a lot of older guys tell them like, hey, listen, don't keep doing that. You're going to destroy your body. And a lot of younger guys like don't listen because they're like, listen, I want to keep going. And I think one of the major issues that isn't really addressed a lot when it comes to construction, especially carpenters, is like you can make a buck, Antonio, just saying. Thanks, Billy. Is the fact that, there's constantly layoffs going on and people are worried about their jobs. So they're trying to make themselves, as valuable as possible. And so they're going above and beyond, maybe trying to kind of outshine their coworkers because they want to make sure that, they have bills. And because of that constant like dog eat dog mentality, guys will overextend themselves. I knew a young guy who just started maybe a second term apprentice and he was carrying a lot of lumber, and we were working in a older building that had like a lot of rotting floorboards. And so he was rushing around and end up tripping and breaking his ankle. And it was like something where he was out of work for like 6 months. And so I understand the mindset of trying to be, as efficient and as productive as possible. But if you are overextending yourself, if you are carrying a lot of, weight, you're definitely going to hurt yourself in the long run. So you want to make sure that you have a long career opposed to burning the candle at both ends. And then you're not able to do this job, 20, 30 years in the future. So you kind of want to find that balance. And then, but there are some older guys that definitely do push guys too, like where, you'll see a guy pick up a couple sticks of 2x and listen, why are you only carrying 2 16-footers? You should be carrying at least 4 or 5. And that makes sense sometimes, but that's not always the key. And that's not always the rule. So you want to find that balance so that you're not, hurting yourself for your ego or because someone else doesn't care about your body because they've wrecked their body in the past. And so they want to keep passing that tradition down. So you kind of want to think about that too. Like, is this going to damage my body beyond repair moving forward if I keep up with this mentality? Am I waking up sore? Am I waking up feeling like, I haven't got adequate rest because I really put my body, through the ringer yesterday? If that's the case, kind of slow down. And if you do get laid off, there are other companies. I think that's something that's important to talk about is that, listen, if you're working for a company that's making you feel unsafe, they're really riding your ass, they're treating you like shit, they're not giving you the adequate like help you need, there are other companies out there and there are other chances to work. And so don't necessarily kill yourself for one company because, again, if you get injured, they're going to want to fire you or lay you off, and then they're going to replace you with somebody else. And so don't sacrifice your body for a company that you're like not invested in. I can understand like what he's talking about, maybe working for your own company, working for yourself and really, putting yourself through the ringer because you're getting all the benefits. But if you're working for someone else, killing yourself for their profit doesn't really make any sense. I can understand, doing your job adequately, working hard, giving your full effort, but going above and beyond where you're going to injure yourself, they're going to be upset with you. They're going to blame you. They're going to be upset the fact that you hurt yourself on their job. So they're not going to respect the fact that, you every single day you came in and went above and beyond. When you get injured, they look at you as a liability now. So you want to make sure you keep that in your mind. Harley says, my journeyman yesterday is in a hospital, drilled through a fire extinguisher cabinet. Then 30 minutes later told me he's better and he's better than me in every way. And then I had no room to talk because I'm a walking error. He then kept going on and on about how I'm not equal to him as a worker or even as a human. I was ready to throw hands and they told me I'm pathetic. Again, like I said, man, people who are, Harley, this is for you, people who are, really competent, who are really good, don't act like this. like that you exude that confidence because you know what you're doing. That the confidence and the competence comes out because it shows your work. If you have to put somebody down, you have to treat people like shit, and it's not like in a banter way where like you're coming together and you're talking shit and like you're building a stronger bond. That's different than people like calling people pathetic and subhuman, that kind of thing. There's a lot of weird energy when it comes to a lot of dudes, and a lot of these guys, they take that stuff home, and then you wonder why these guys are divorced. They have like alcohol problems, because how you are on the job site usually is how you are everywhere. When you have somebody under you that you can like dictate and treat them like shit, that doesn't just stop on the job site. So realistically, you should feel sorry for these guys because they're living a life that I would want to trade places with. So kind of have that in your mind, like, listen, this guy is a piece of shit and this guy is like really arrogant and rude. You're not going to be around him all the time. Like you might have a time where you have a season where you're around him, but again, realize that this is not permanent and you are going to move forward with somebody else in the future. So just kind of like put it in that perspective. Like, this is not great right now, but things are going to get better. That person is a piece of shit right now, but don't think that's like a life sentence. Like, I've worked for some really mean people that really didn't like me because of the fact that they felt that I got in the union because I'm black and affirmative action hires or whatever. And so they kind of like felt that I didn't deserve my spot and their daughter should have came in instead of me. And it's like, hey, bro, I have no idea of like why I got chosen. I had a pretty good interview, but like if they hired me because I'm black, it is what it is. I'm just gonna work my ass off to keep my spot. But at the same time, like you downplaying me and treating me like shit, it's not gonna make it better. Like me quitting isn't necessarily gonna make sure your daughter gets in the union, right? And so I think sometimes we might get upset and you wanna, act out and you wanna, get violent, but that's not gonna solve anything either, because now they're gonna play the victim and then you're going to get laid off and they're going to keep going. So keep that in mind moving forward. If guys are being really arrogant and being, really like misogynistic or really like aggressive towards you, usually those are the guys that are covering up inadequacies. And those are the guys who usually aren't going to last that long, because again, they're not just treating you like shit. That's going to continue on for other people. And then there's going to be a vibe of like, this guy can't work well with anybody. And so why would they keep that person on? I don't care if you are a master carpenter. If you bring the morale down for every single person you work with, and then they're not doing their best, it doesn't matter how good you are. You know what I'm saying? So keep that in mind. These guys are going to cross themselves out in the future. Like, you acting like a piece of shit is just going to come back on you later on. And how you treat people is how you treat every person. And usually that leads to you having a more negative and, just overall bad time. You know what I'm saying? So Greg and Billy said, Harley, look at it as a crappy weather and ride the storm out and look for a better situation. Exactly. Working for one company or working for one bad situation is not a life sentence. Things do get better. Things do change. And then again, when you get in a good situation, appreciate that for what it is. And when you're in a shitty situation, realize it doesn't last forever.
So all the manual labor on a job site fell on me. Now, these things aren't uncommon. That's just part of construction. They call it manual labor for a reason. And the truth is, I love being a carpenter. You get to be outside all day, which is where I'm happiest. You build things that are standing there when you drive away, and every day is different and it's rewarding. But it turns out I just didn't have the sort of knees that were going to get me to 70 in the field, like my friend from Louisiana. In fact, it looked like they weren't even going to get me to 40 if I didn't do something quick. So out of desperation, I started a YouTube channel, and it somehow grew to almost 300,000 subscribers in about 3 years. As far as I'm concerned, it defies all explanation. But this is my job now, and I try to take it seriously and I try to do it well. And yet every week, without fail, I still get calls from old clients or would-be new clients asking if I can do work for them. And I have to tell them I'm out. I had knee surgery. I had to stop. They always say, oh God, we're sorry to hear that. Do you know anybody else who does good carpentry? And the crazy thing is, I don't have a single name anymore of someone that I can recommend in the area. Not one. I'm a carpenter, and I don't know any other good independent carpenters. How does that happen? I mean, it's no mystery that trade participation is down. And I'm talking across the board, across the country, at all times. I'm not going to get into a lot of hard statistics because there are already a lot of other organizations and publications out there that are heavily researching this stuff. like my friend Misha Fisher, who is the chief economist for Angie's List and Home Advisor. I'll link some of his stuff below, as well as some other journals and publications that talk about these things. But these reports have been saying for years now what most everyone already knows on some level. Young people aren't going into the trades as much. They're getting 4-year degrees, they're going to work for...
One thing I also want to talk about too is like we're seeing now moving forward, we're seeing a lot of younger people. They're requiring a lot more. I wouldn't necessarily say like coddling, but they definitely do need like a different touch opposed to back in the past. Again, there's an approach where you can have somebody who can give you a pat in the back for encouragement, or some person that's gonna like really yell at you and get you motivated that way. The more like Bill Belichick route, or the more like Pete Carroll route, if you know football. Like some people are willing to take direction and encouragement different ways, and so we definitely are seeing a generation that has been raised up more with like a pat on the back, more like affirming them, being more like inspirational when they talk to them, opposed to like giving them like hard facts, like I don't like this, that was like this, and then now a lot of people, when they hear like a lot of negative stuff, they haven't been brought up to withstand that. And so you see a lot of younger guys, like when they first get reamed out bad by some of these older guys, they just kind of like shrink up in themselves, and you see them kind of like walk around like kind of like shell shocked. And it's like, for me, I had a different lifestyle, different upbringing growing up. I got yelled at all the time. I got talked bad to. So when I heard that, I was kind of like, hey, it is what it is. Like I just gotta let that shit bounce off me, and if it hits and it applies, then it hurts, and if it doesn't, I let it fly. And so you kind of have to take that approach. But if we have younger guys coming in who have never really faced any true adversity, it's going to be tough when you first start off, and you got to be able to take those slings, because sometimes you may have a tight schedule and something has to be done and you didn't do a good job, and you get pointed out, and like the anger comes out, you know what I'm saying? So people are not always going to speak to you in a way that you want to be spoken to. When it comes to how they're addressing you, they may use, a lot of like expletives, and they might start cussing at you or being angry at you because you made a mistake. You have to kind of take it as like, hey, they're emotional right now. This thing's happened. But again, I'm getting stronger from this. And that's why I've been reading a lot more books, especially there's a book called Anti-Fragile by Nasib Taleb, and he talks about like how every time you go through some hard stuff and you overcome that, you become a stronger person. People need to overcome adversity. And so a lot of younger people are going to kind of be thrown to the wolves, and then some will survive and some won't. And so that's why I think a lot of younger people are just seeing from the outside what's going on in the trades, and they're just like, hell no, I'm not signing up for that. But I think what really should be going on is like, listen, I'm going to take that challenge on, and I know I can make it. If older people in the past could make it, and it was a lot tougher back then, I heard stories about people getting hit in the head with hammers and people just doing like the wildest shit in the past. That's not happening at all anymore. You know what I'm saying? So things are a lot easier. I think that just thinking about things in the past, how it was going, I think we can also, definitely improve. I think that the adversity we're going through now, I think you definitely can make it through. This is not the hardest job I've ever done by far. I think I've done, way harder things, way more challenging things, more like life risking things. And so I look at people, kind of like getting more aggressive or angry at me. I kind of take it with a grain of salt. And if it does apply to me, I kind of register that in. But if they're just being like angry for no reason, I kind of let it fly off, like a duck with, water off my back. So you kind of take that in. But as a younger generation, you're going to have to get adjusted to a field that isn't really going to be, as coddling as other fields, what I mean? But at the same time, it's still very, very rewarding. Building something, being outside, working with guys, I think there's nothing that compares to that really, that feeling of accomplishment when you do a concrete pour and, you finish the slab off and you just look and say, look, we did that, man. Nothing went wrong. Everything happened. Was a good day. I think that's probably some of the best feelings I ever had. Like, going after work and having a beer with the fellas and everybody respecting you and everybody seeing your work ethic and wanting to see you again on the next job. I think that's probably one of the best feelings. And then going by a building and seeing like, you had a part of that. I think that's probably one of the best parts about being a carpenter. Let me talk about some of these comments real quick. How do you ask questions after someone has ripped into you, especially when the person you might need to ask is the one who just yelled at you? My advice is give them a couple minutes, let them let them kind of fume, let them kind of get all that energy out of them, and then come back at the end of the day and listen, say, hey, listen, man, I made a mistake. How can I rectify that in the future? I think that's something very, very important. You want to make sure you're constantly keep asking, whether you be a journeyman or superintendent, how could I improve on this? How can I make sure this doesn't happen again? What should I have done to make sure that this didn't happen? This doesn't happen in the future. And I think once you kind of have that mindset, I think things definitely will change for the better. If your mindset is like, that guy just yelled at me and now I'm just gonna kind of shut my ears off to them, and then whatever he's saying kind of comes in, but doesn't really register. I think that's not a really great approach. But I think if you are more receptive and you give them a chance, they'll kind of scale things back. They'll understand that, like, listen, you made a mistake. We've all been there. We've all come from a place where we didn't know. And so I think if you say, listen, I know I made a mistake and I take, full responsibility for that. How could I, not do this again in the future? Like, how would you have done that same thing differently? And then now it gives them a chance to explain things, and don't do it like, say, if it's a real time sensitive issue, like where, you're constantly, really in the thick of things still, and energy is still high. Wait towards like lunchtime or break when, things have calmed down. And then I think that's probably your best bet, because again, as an apprentice, someone just first starting off, you have to be able to build a rapport with these guys and be able to talk with them after, the energy is kind of lowered down. So, yeah, I think that's how I would approach it. Ask them, how could I improve? What would you have done? And so I can make sure I don't do the same problem or the same thing again in the future.
Corporations and tech companies. From what I've read, something like 75% of contractors across industries have said that the shortage is preventing them from taking on more work and growing. The average age of trade workers is constantly getting older, and the younger pool is shrinking. This is hard fact, and it's hitting every corner at once. And yet, from my point of view, not all trades are experiencing this equally. When my old clients call and they need the name of a good carpenter, I got nothing to offer. But if they ask me for a plumber, or an electrician, or an HVAC specialist, I can throw out 10 names. They could have someone good at their door that afternoon to give them a bid or possibly even start doing work. If they need a roofer, I got 5 companies to throw out. Painters, drywallers, got a dozen of each. And yet I can't give them a single decent carpenter that's essentially doing what I was doing in the field. Now, why in the world is that? Frankly, it's because carpentry is a tough gig. Carpenters have a lot of responsibilities. Think about it. We live in the age of specialization. The mortgage crisis of 2008 decimated the construction industry. You had mid-size and large construction companies all over America essentially vanish overnight.
And that's something that's definitely huge too when it comes to construction and just how it's viewed. The job security is not as good as other, career paths. And especially if you don't work for a company, you work for a huge company where you're just a number, where, you're just used for your labor. It makes it very difficult for you to want to stay on in this trade. Like, I work for a company where I'm blessed, where they keep me going. I've worked for them for 7 years now. So once the job ends, I get moved somewhere else, or maybe I'm at a job for a while and then they need me somewhere else. And so I constantly keep moving, and I don't have that layoff period. I think that layoff period where, you worked your ass off, but you didn't make the cut, or you're not one of the last guys. And so you kind of have that depression or anxiety because you don't know when your next check is going to come. I think that definitely adds into why becoming a carpenter is so much more difficult opposed to other trades. Like, if you're working yourself out of a job constantly and you don't know like what things are going to look like financially in the next like 6 months, I think that's a hard gig to sign up for, opposed to picking a more I guess like for lack of a better term, like more like something you can already grasp, but you have a good idea. Like, okay, I assume I'm not going to get laid off from this job. I can kind of plan for the future. But if you're a carpenter and you're constantly worrying about being laid off and then going out and like chasing cranes, I definitely can see how that could be something where it would dissuade people from wanting to join into this field. I think that's definitely huge.
Night. They disbanded their workforce, and for some years, these people were without jobs. They drifted into other industries, some line of work that wasn't quite so boom or bust. Some of them remained in construction in more specialized, smaller fields, but a lot of them didn't. They were forced to go on to something that seemed more reliable, something that would always be there and would always pay. And of all the factors involved, it's that last word that makes all the difference. Pay. Why aren't there as many carpenters around as there used to be? Frankly, because it doesn't pay that much. And yet our responsibilities as carpenters are vast. Painting and drywall are simpler trades. Now, that does not make them easy. I've always said there's an art form to both. Plumbing, on the other hand, is very complex. There's a lot to learn, things have to be done right, and there's a small margin for error. But there are much better training programs associated with plumbing. It's a more regulated industry. And once you know plumbing, it has a more contained job description. In the field, you're probably either roughing in new houses or you're doing repair work on older houses. And the same goes for electrical and HVAC. If you're an electrician, every day is...
And that's something too, like I was saying before, because our scope is so wide, it's very hard to teach you every single facet of being a carpenter. And even a 4-year apprenticeship, you could double the apprenticeship, and I still don't think that even for 8 years, you could still know every single thing to an adequate level that you could be like a journeyman at everything, whether it be like clean room all the way to building footings, to installing windows, whatever. Some of these things kind of do have overlap when it comes to, using your tape measure, knowing how to plumb level square. Some of these things do have overlap, but some things you definitely do need extra teaching. You definitely need more certification. So if you have other trades where they're just doing the same thing every single time, where they're pulling wire, they're bending conduit, and those things don't really change, just the environment, I think it makes it a lot easier for you to master those skills opposed to everything that carpenters do. You could be a carpenter and just do general services where you're just working on handrail, you're making sure there's safety compliance is going on, and you could barely even wear your bags as carpenters. Or you can go to the other side where you're in a footing in 5 inches of mud and you're building concrete formwork. These are both carpenters, but they're doing 2 different jobs, but they kind of have some of the same responsibilities as far as safety, as far as OSHA requirements. So again, because our scale is so wide, it makes it difficult for you to say who is and isn't a carpenter. You know what I'm saying? If you can frame a house, does that mean that you're competent at siding and waterproofing of windows and stuff on a commercial space? You probably could be taught it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you know every single quality it takes to do those things until you do it. So trades that have a lot of the same tasks but just are different based on the location, I think definitely have an advantage over us carpenters.
Wiring, fixtures, and panels. If you're an HVAC technician, every day is AC units and furnaces. You really get to focus down. And on top of that tighter focus, you get paid. According to Home Advisor, most licensed plumbers make $80 to $130 an hour. In my area, it hovers right around $100. Electricians in my area frequently charge between $70 to $90 an hour. No one bats an eye at that. HVAC technicians, if they're licensed and independent, can easily charge $100 to $150 an hour. And then your carpenter shows up and charges $25 to $50 an hour. That's half or less. And on any given job, we may be asked to do an insane variety of things. Build or repair fences, gates, decks, sheds. We may be asked to frame in new walls or ceilings, to repair rotted joists or structural posts, or to trim out whole rooms, or even do custom built-ins. We might hang doors, windows, and cabinets, or run all the siding and exterior.
Another thing that's definitely you see when it comes to carpenters is because of all these DIY shows, and because everything's so accessible as far as tool bags, hammers, all these things, a lot of people view it hey, I'm not willing to pay that top level because I kind of think I can do your job. I'm only paying you because I don't want to do it. And so people feel if we were going to charge too much, that they're not going to pay it because they feel they can do your job. But when it comes to electricians or plumbers, that's kind of out of their scope of being able to conceive doing those jobs, and they're more dangerous. So people are willing to pay them that money. But if you were to charge someone, $100 an hour as a carpenter to trim out a window, they might think hey, I see what you did there. I feel I could do that. I don't think it's worth it. It's kind of like someone being a cook and paying, top level for a chef. People kind of have a hard time paying people for their experience and their skill set because they feel like, hey, this cook is good and this food is good, but I feel like at a certain point, this is just too much. I feel like I could do this the same thing you're doing for a lot less. And I think that is one of the things that make it where people kind of look down on the carpenter field period because they feel like they could either do your job or if push come to shove that they could hire someone for cheaper. And Harley says, time to get the kids fed and then cleaned up and ready for bed. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for sharing your info too. Oh, I appreciate you, Harley. See you later.
Trim on your whole house. Along the way, we may fix every little broken handle or missing threshold that you have. And we do it all in my area for like $30 to $50 an hour. And a lot of this is hard, back-breaking work carrying a lot of weight in adverse conditions. We're just a step below the masons who have the hardest, most demanding labor out there, along with the roofers who constantly work in danger of falling. Now my point here is not to bemoan how difficult we have it. As I said, I love being a carpenter. It's my chosen profession. Carpentry is like romantic. It's the most romanticized trade. But when a young person comes up to me and says, I'm thinking about getting into the trades, should I become a carpenter? At this point, I feel obligated to look them in the eye and say, no, don't do it. Go get your plumbing certification, your HVAC training. Do your 2 to 4 year apprenticeship. Learn as much as you can. And as soon as you can, go out on your own. Make those big bucks.
That's tough. And I mean, he's not wrong. I've had younger cousins come to me and ask me if they can get in the field if they become a carpenter. And I think because I'm loyal to the trade that hired me first. I applied to every single skilled labor trade, and the carpenters hit me back first, and so I'm more of a loyal person. But again, like if you had a choice of picking a trade that had more certs, a larger moat, the ability to keep the labor force more suppressed because it takes a lot more to get in there. Obviously, that's definitely going to be more advantageous for you. A lot of times people kind of look at, they put morality on things and they think, this is better because of this. But if you think about what's more advantageous for you, what's going to lead you to be more like successful moving forward, you definitely are going to pick a field where it's a little bit harder for, unskilled labor to compete for your job. And so I definitely can see that. And so I think that's going to be something huge moving forward. Like, how do you keep people who are going to do a job, less than you outside of out of your occupation? You really can't when it comes to carpentry. So I think that's something huge. And then again, the pay. I remember when I first started as a first term apprentice, you got paid half of what a journeyman did. And so I think that when I first started, it was like $17 an hour. And so when electricians are getting paid like 25 starting out, it's very hard for you to want to take the best of the best, the cream of the crop when it comes to people who want to be in the skilled trades. If you can take them, if they have a choice, like, listen, I'm going to make $8 less, and I know at the end of the day, I'm going to be making way more. Why would I ever choose to be a carpenter? And I think that's something that we had to grapple with as the carpenters union. So we increase the wages for the start so that we can become more attractive to, the people that are going to be, the best prospects moving forward. So I definitely do think that, but at the same time, you're not going to make leaps and bounds and like, hey, if the electricians are making, $60 an hour, you can't just increase our wages to that same amount of money because again, first of all, that's too dramatic of a pay increase. And second of all, there's way more of us. We don't want to price ourselves out of the market where people are like, listen, I'd rather hire, guys who don't know what they're doing and teach them opposed to paying everybody in this job site 30 carpenters, $60 an hour. It's just too much for me to withstand. I can't make any profit like that. So there is a balance, there's a give and take. And I think that's something we have to address and also keep these guys accountable. Like, listen, if you're paying everybody the same wage, I don't think anybody cares as far as carpenters. But then when you start doing weird stuff, like where you're paying people under the table and you're giving them damn near like slave wages where you're paying them like less than their worth and now you're suppressing the wages down, I think that's the issue. I don't think anybody would have a problem with illegal immigration if you paid those guys the same wages we have to contend with. I think that's the most important aspect of it. Like if you're going to pay people the same wages and so it's not going to undercut us, I don't think they would care. And I think that's important too. Like, people have to be paid a wage where they can survive and still be able to have a family. But if you have people who are starving, who are going to compete for your job, that don't really intend on living here, they want to go back to wherever they're from, whether it be, Russia, Ukraine, Ecuador, they're just coming here for the money, and they're just stacking their money up because they can live better, in another country. Us in America, we still have to, raise our kids here. We're definitely also competing with other industries, like, so it's hard for people, if you are going to be a carpenter or a skilled labor force, if you're not getting paid enough to survive, you're definitely going to leave, right? So I think that's something important to look at too. Greg says, I was going to be a carpenter and it was cold and I got blisters, so I went home. Yeah. Yeah. I could definitely see how, working in the rain or just having this stuff wearing your body can definitely be something that dissuades you from wanting to join in the carpenters union.
Put it away. You play your cards right as a plumber, you can die a multi-millionaire and have plenty of money along the way. Don't be like me. Don't blow your knee out at 36 and have to rely on a YouTube career to finally have the money to pay to fix it. That's the reality of our jobs in the trades. We will have to sell, to some degree, our bodies and our health for money. That's the hard truth of the matter. Now, many of you out there might be watching this and saying, you're not helping anything right now. Here, I'm supposed to be an advocate for the trades, and I'm telling young people it's going to destroy your body and leave you poor. But I'm not actually talking to them. I'm talking to you, the viewer, who hires tradespeople for work. You're the one who's holding the checkbook. And the message I have for you might actually be a little bit scarier, because I only see one way out of this labor shortage crisis. In the future, there's a good chance that you're going to have to pay more for everything. The old timers, like my concrete buddy, they're aging out. They can't work forever. In the next generation who needs to fill their shoes, why are they going to come do it? Organizations like the National Association of Home Builders want to advocate for people to get back into the trades. They want to make it seem cool again and worthwhile, which it is. But I'm sorry, it being cool is never going to bring these kids back. There is only one thing that has ever historically motivated people to do difficult jobs. Money. And I'm not talking about $60,000 a year. I'm talking about a lot more. Towards the end of my functional career, I started charging $70 or more an hour if I even did hourly work. And I would frequently hear from people, it just shouldn't be that much for a carpenter. And I wanted to reply, says who? Who really sets that value? I live in Raleigh. There are people a mile down the street at Red Hat making $175,000 a year. And I'm not saying they don't deserve it. That job is difficult. It takes a lot of training. Not a lot of people are probably qualified to do it. But you know what? This job is hard too. And on a blazing hot summer day, I dare say it's a lot harder. And on top of that, I don't see that many people qualified to do it anymore. In 1950, carpenters and tradespeople were everywhere. These days,
that's something else too. Like, when you had after World War II and everybody was coming to like rebuild the country, as far as like the infrastructure, the highways, all those things, a lot of people, like the government really invested a lot into the carpenter field. And so we had a lot more skilled labor training. And so everybody kind of was a lot more handy. When you had like shop classes, a lot of people knew how to fix things themselves. And because we've lost that in our schooling, of course things are going to cost more. Like if you don't know how to do something, especially properly, like you may be able to look up a YouTube video and figure something out kind of, but you're not like going to do it proficiently. It's going to cost more. And so I think moving forward, the wages are just going to go up. And if they don't, then people just won't do it. And then they're forced to go up. Like if you have, I don't know what happened. If you have a field where nobody wants to join it and you really need your roof fixed, or you need, your wall patched or something going on. If that's not the case, then if you can't do it yourself, then it's going to be a problem. You know what I'm saying? So it says, timely, I reckon another 3 or 5 years before we get what we deserve in terms of pay. Seth, the reason I'm asking is geography makes a difference. Northern New Jersey. So Seth asked, I'm a first-time apprentice waiting for a job. Do you know how I can find any on the dispatch report? I think, again, going to your local, asking your union reps, really pounding the street, looking for cranes, if you are able to look for a job, I think that's probably your best bet. What? My laptop didn't die. What happened? Something happened? Weird. I don't know. I've been talking for a little bit, so that's weird. I don't know. So now it's back. But again, like I was saying, your stream cut out. Union jobs most likely, but by seniority, no. You got shut down by the tube. Did I really? It disconnected for like 2 minutes and you came back. You have the blurred videos to make them smaller. Oh wow. Yeah, I don't know. You have to, Greg, explain it to Antonio. For God's Black History Month. Whoa. Well, I appreciate you guys. He pretty much was saying everything that I was saying too. Maybe they banned me because I was using this video. I haven't reacted to content before in the past, so I don't really know exactly what the guidelines are. This video will probably be demonetized anyway, so but I do think I want to kind of help you guys and talk about subjects, and so hopefully this does get better, and then I kind of then want to do things that don't really involve other people's content, because again, that can happen where they can, like, I use someone else's video and I'm reacting to it, and maybe I didn't do it properly, so I don't want to like be like a parasite to someone else's content. So I'm going to start bringing out my own things and talk about different subjects myself. So I think we'll figure it out. I think it was just a Wi-Fi problem. I don't know. I wasn't, the content policy violation happens to everyone. Okay. So I appreciate you guys. I'll catch you guys on the next one, and peace. I appreciate you guys. So before I go, never mind. I was gonna go. Like I said before, I'm going to post different things. Let me know the Discord channel if you have any ideas about videos you want to see. Again, I don't want to just keep making things that necessarily you guys don't want to see. And so I'm going to be asking you guys for more ideas. I want to make sure that that you guys are getting your questions answered. I don't want to just be making things for the void. You know what I'm saying? I want to make sure that you guys are getting content you want that's exciting. I kind of feel like I'm kind of getting more of a groove of this thing, kind of getting more comfortable in front of the camera. I'm not looking as spurgy or like autistic as I was before in the past. So I kind of want to make this content more catered towards you guys. Obviously, I know like carpentry isn't going to be like something I can talk expansively about because of the fact that I can't film everything, but I do want to talk about different subjects, whether it be the books that I'm currently reading, ideas that I have on the job. So I'm going to drop the Discord chat link for you guys. And if you guys want to talk and kick it and ask me questions there, I'm going to post that link for you guys. Let me see. Not tools. 1 second. Sorry, guys. New video. Things we find interesting. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to try to make more content for you guys, be more consistent. Like I said, just a little more difficult when, I am doing this while working a full-time job. So I'm going to try my best to be more consistent when it comes to this. And that is my Discord link right there. So hopefully you guys can see that, and I appreciate you guys. I'm going to, again, like I said, post more content. Hopefully you guys can appreciate it moving forward. All right, peace.